Today on Fear and Greed, Donald Trump signs a swathe of executive orders reversing US policy on energy, the environment, tax and electric vehicles, while suggesting 25% tariffs for close trading partners. Business failures surge 50%, and weight loss drugs helping thousands of people are shown to worsen 19 medical conditions. Plus, market reaction to Donald Trump's win, and Prime Minister Anthony Albanese calls a national cabinet meeting after another antisemitic attack. Welcome to Fear and Greed, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Wednesday, the 22nd of January 2025. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, the main story this morning, Donald Trump wasted no time whatsoever following his inauguration yesterday morning, Australian time, signing a whole bunch of executive orders undoing many of Joe Biden's decisions, requiring workers in government return to the office full time, and withdrawing from the Paris Climate Treaty.
There was a stack of them. There are executive orders on illegal immigration, a freeze on new regulations, a freeze on new hiring in the bureaucracy. That's a federal bureaucracy, Washington there. He said that the government must address the cost of living crisis, and there was an executive order on that one as well. He had one on mandating free speech. He rescinded a bunch of things that Joe Biden had done, including that half of all new vehicles sold by 2030 had to be electric vehicles. I wonder what Elon thought about that one.
I can't imagine that would go. Do you reckon he knew in advance? Surely
You'd have to know.
He would imagine that Elon Musk would know pretty much everything that goes on.
You'd think so. And the share price of Tesla took off when Joe Biden did that. I remember that. 2023, I think it was. There was executive orders around oil drilling in the Arctic. That'll be allowed again. Cuba has been put back on the list of state sponsors of terrorism. Sanctions have been lifted on some far-right Israeli settler groups. Now, Donald Trump said he planned to sign executive orders on tariffs, 25% on Mexico and Canada from 1 February. We haven't seen the paperwork, so until you see the paperwork with Donald Trump, you never know whether it's going to happen. It was a little vague on China and others. He dumped a global deal on ensuring a minimum corporate tax rate. The rest of the world says that it will ensure there's a 15% minimum corporate tax rate. Donald Trump's dumped that one. He's pulled out of the World Health Organization, reduced regulations on the development of artificial intelligence, gave TikTok 75 days to find a buyer in the US, or at least to buy for half the social media app. He was very critical of Joe Biden. He basically said that most of the bureaucrats that Joe Biden had appointed will be fired. He also pardoned a bunch of protesters that stormed the US Congress on 6 January 2021. One guy who's in jail for 22 years, sentence of 22 years, he's a violent criminal. He got pardoned as well.
Sean, it's quite an extraordinary day, really. And look, you have covered business. You've been a business journalist for a long time. You've covered politics. You've worked in the US as a US correspondent as well. Can you remember a day when so much happened in just 24 hours?
No, absolutely not. The criticism of Trump in 2016 was that he didn't do enough. And then when he finally worked out how to do it, he started doing stuff. Well, he did so much in the first 24 hours. And I think that's in response to 2016 taking a while. What you might see is that he's doing a bunch of stuff in this first week, and then he'll let it settle. I mean, if he keeps at this pace, who knows where the world ends up.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting yesterday. There was plenty of ceremony with the inauguration, though not a huge amount of convention.
No. He wasn't very nice about Joe Biden. Very critical, in fact.
That does go against what normally happens, isn't it? Usually there's a certain amount of grace.
Yeah, absolutely no grace yesterday whatsoever. Elon Musk was a big part of the day. He gave us somewhat, did you see the salute he gave?
Yeah, that
hand
image,
straight out, palm down. Oh.
Not a good look, and it's certainly one that everyone is familiar with in this rise of kind of far-right ideology all over the place. Not a good look.
Dreadful. Bloomberg had a great stat. They said there was $1.3 trillion worth of billionaires at the inauguration. So we're talking about Elon Musk, but Amazon's Jeff Bezos, Meta's Mark Zuckerberg, LVMH's Bernard Arnault. He's about the third or fourth richest person in the world, French guy. Google co-founder Sergey Brin, Alphabet CEO Sundar Pichai, Apple CEO Tim Cook, Rupert Murdoch was there. The other thing I thought was interesting, already US government websites have started pulling down the promotion of issues such as climate change, reproductive rights, diversity in employment. They've actually started coming off already.
Oh, that was quick. What was the reaction from markets yesterday?
Well, business leaders were front and centre yesterday. So Trump should be a president for financial markets. He should be a president for business. Now, initially, Wall Street rose in after-hours trading. The US dollar fell. That's kind of good news. However, when he started talking about 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, he kind of alluded to China without saying what he was going to do. Markets then fell. The US dollar strengthened. The thing is, when you have that sort of uncertainty, people want US dollars. It's a strong currency. So other currencies, like the Mexican peso, the Canadian dollar, the Aussie dollar, they all fell pretty sharply. In Australia, safe stocks did best. We'll come to that later on, but banks particularly did well. One thing that Prime Minister Anthony Albanese said yesterday, which was interesting, he said dumping the Paris Climate Agreement might actually mean opportunities for Australia. It'll be interesting because under the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, there's a bunch of Australian companies getting a lot of money out of that. That'll be watered down, but maybe they'll come home and start doing stuff here. So that'll be interesting.
All right, Sean, we have a lot to get through. As we said, that was a massive, massive 24 hours, and that is really just the inauguration and the reaction to it. So still more to come. We're talking local business failures. We're talking the closure of an Australian e-commerce company. So much more still to cover. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese called a national cabinet meeting yesterday in response to the dangerous escalation of anti-Semitism after a childcare centre was gutted in an arson attack yesterday morning.
The fire at the centre in Maroubra in Sydney's east occurred just before 1 a.m. yesterday morning. If the Jews was sprayed in black paint on the wall. Now there's a synagogue about 100 metres away. As a result, Anthony Albanese was almost forced to call a national cabinet meeting. They met yesterday. That's the state premiers and Anthony Albanese. They all agree that something needs to be done on this incredible outbreak of anti-Semitism, which is just horrendous at the moment, though we don't really have any definite plans about quite what they're going to do as yet. Well, I'm sure we'll hear about that in coming days.
It's interesting, isn't it, to see National Cabinet kind of being revived?
Yeah, it's a real COVID thing, isn't it?
Yeah, indeed. And we haven't it really hasn't been much of a feature now for the last kind of 18 months, 2 years or so.
Yeah, they've still been holding national cabinets, but they just haven't been particularly high profile, not like COVID days.
Yeah, indeed. Now, while we're talking about politics, Sean, both the Coalition and Labor are upping their social media activity ahead of the next election, which is interesting because at the same time they're implementing a ban on under 16s accessing online platforms. So clearly they still do see value for other parts of the population.
So both sides are calling on politicians for high quality original content. The idea is that they're going to engage younger Australians. Obviously, Donald Trump is the role model for that. According to a story in the Financial Review, Peter Dutton has been pushing the coalition candidates to use TikTok. Labor is more likely to favour Facebook. Now, Facebook, Google Search, Google AdWords, and YouTube will be used by both sides, of course. It's just that the coalition is pushing into TikTok a bit harder. Thing about TikTok, it's a bit like LinkedIn. You can't really control where the content goes. You need to reach audiences organically. So you need really effective visuals and words to get out there so that they're shared. Facebook's really different. Politicians can target specific postcodes, specific demographics. Just makes it easier to get content in front of swing voters.
Now, I mentioned this one earlier, Sean. Business failures have surged by 50% this financial year as higher operating expenses, along with cost of living pressures and a crackdown on unpaid tax debt, all kind of combined to force more companies to close.
Yeah, a bit of a disaster. Last financial year, there were about 11,000 business failures. Expect about 16,000 this year, according to a report in The Australian. The watchdog, the Australian Securities and Investments Commission, shows that figures from them shows that 7,483 insolvency appointments occurred in the 6 months to the end of December. That's a record-breaking amount. Now, that beat this year at 16,000, that would beat the previous record of 2012. There are 3.47 million registered businesses at the end of 2024. 3.47 million. That's one every 10 people? One every 9 or 10 people?
That is a lot.
How many businesses do you have, actually? How many ABN businesses that are ABN number do you have?
Our household has two. Yeah. Which I mean, then
It's probably
that's probably about, and you would be what?
4.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so maybe it's not that many.
No, but I mean, we've talked as well on the weekend edition of Fear and Greed about the sharp rise in the number of Australian businesses in the last, 10 years or so, that it really did shoot up kind of towards the end of the 2010s. Is that what you say?
Oh, I don't know. COVID, basically.
Yeah, pre-COVID, just slightly pre-COVID. Anyway, big numbers. Big numbers.
Big numbers.
Now, Optus, Sean, I know you're a sports streaming fan. Optus is considering offloading its popular sports streaming platform to Nine Entertainment in a move that would hand the rights of the EPL, the English Premier League, to Stan ahead of the arrival of a British rival, which is written DAZN, Sean. And you have been reminding me constantly. I cannot. It's like DAZN. DAZN?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so, but I'm probably going to get that wrong. Now you put me on the spot. I can't remember. DAZN.
And you were just looking at me just then going, yeah, I know you're going to fluff it. You're going to fluff it, and I did. So well done.
So Optus had attempted to create a major sports streaming service. It had bought the rights to the Premier League in 2016. It had knocked Foxtel out over then. In its most recent deal, which includes the Women's Super League, it runs until 2028. It's worth about $100 million a year. The AFR is reporting that Optus has approached potential buyers, including Stan. The discussions are ongoing, so it's not a done deal yet. Stan has really pushed into sport, so it's got Wimbledon and Roland Garros in tennis, obviously the Australian Open at the moment. It's got Super Rugby, UEFA Champions League. EPL is a big one because EPL and NBA, the American NBA, they're the two sports that have got these massive global followings. So it would be quite a coup for Stan to get the EPL. Foxtel has the NBA at the moment.
Sean, I thought this was interesting. Wesfarmers is closing its struggling marketplace business Catch because it's struggling to take on, the ultra cheap international sites. And lately, we've just seen the rise and rise of Temu from China and, of course, the long-term dominance now of Amazon.
That's right. Catch will finish before the end of this financial year. There's been years of losses, $100 million last financial year. Wesfarmers bought Catch for $230 million back in 2019, provide a lot of money for the owners, not so much for Wesfarmers. Basically sells everything from kids' sneakers to electronic goods and books, just not enough of them. Number one online retailer in Australia, Michael. Who do you think it is?
Amazon?
Yeah, Amazon's 2.
Okay.
It's invested about $5 billion in the last couple of years to get to that position. But it's the big retailers. Woolies.
Oh, Woolies.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I'm one of the shoppers.
There
we
you
do
go.
all of our online. Everything from Woolies is online and delivered.
Yeah.
I should have got that.
But I would never use Woolies online.
Really?
Never.
But you're also a bit of a dinosaur.
Woolies first, Amazon, then Coles, Officeworks, JB Hi-Fi and Endeavour, according to Goldman Sachs.
E-commerce is under a bit of pressure, local e-commerce, clearly, from the arrival of Temu and the other big operators. There were some interesting comments yesterday afternoon from Ruslan Kogan because Kogan.com started at the same time as Catch, which I thought was interesting. And he actually said that they made multiple approaches to Wesfarmers to try and buy Catch across the last, he doesn't specify a time period. And he basically expressed sadness that this is the outcome, that it is being shut down, that surely a better alternative would have been to offload it to Kogan.
I guarantee that Ruslan Kogan didn't want to pay too much money for it.
I can't imagine he would be looking to spend a huge amount of money looking for a bargain there. And hey, maybe in these circumstances he might have had one.
Maybe.
Now, Yancoal, Sean, has achieved its production guidance for 2024, delivering nearly 37 million tonnes of coal. But like other companies in the sector, it's really struggling to gain much traction as prices of the fossil fuel suffer.
I've been waiting for about 2 weeks since we came back full-time to get a story on coal because it's really interesting at the moment, and Yancoal's just the reason to get into it. Coal's just on the nose. Even in Donald Trump world. Donald Trump yesterday talked about oil and gas. You didn't hear him talking about thermal coal prices, did you?
That's a good point.
So in 2022, coal was trading at close to $450 a tonne. Most of last year it was back down to about $140 a tonne. Today it's about $115 a tonne. That's about close to 3-year lows. Few things in that. I mean, most of the China story, economic slowdown there, record high inventories of coal. China's actually opening more mines. China is digging up more coal. and that's putting more supply into the market. The good news from Australia's point of view is that about 50% of our coal goes to Japan, and that's an economy where the industrial recovery is underway. Yancoal's share price jumped yesterday, but it's still off 8% over the past 6 months. Whitehaven's off 20% in the past 6 months. New Hope, that's the other big coal producer here, is flat.
Can we just stay in commodities just for a second?
Yes, just for a moment.
And you say that no one's talking about coal. Everybody, though, is talking about copper though, at the moment.
Yes,
and BHP yesterday said that its copper production rose 10% in the first half after its Escondida mine, a Chilean mine, I think it is, reached record production.
Chilean Escondida mine. How cool's that?
That's very, very cool.
It is very cool.
It feels like it brings a bit of culture to the podcast, Sean.
Yeah, a bit of flair, I'd say. The world's biggest miner came out with its production report. So copper production was up 10% in the 6 months to the end of December. Iron ore was up 1%. Steel-making coal production was down 21%, but it sold assets in that period. Nickel production was down 31%, and that's because it actually stopped digging up nickel because of price issues. Copper, as you said, is the hot commodity. We had BHP trying to buy Anglo American last year to get its copper assets. We've had Glencore and Rio talking about combining to somehow boost their copper production. The good news for BHP at the moment in copper is Escondida in Chile. The bad news is the Olympic Dam in South Australia, which actually isn't doing that well. BHP's share price yesterday ended down 1%.
Just quickly before we finish up local news, how did the local market close yesterday?
Up 0.7% to 8,402 points. The financials, the big banks did best. National Australia Bank was up a couple of percent. Corporate news, Santos dropped after it delayed a $2 billion plus oil and gas joint venture project in Western Australia. The two best on the day, Hub24, the wealth manager, jumped 11% after it recorded strong quarterly inflows, and Liontown jumped 12% after it said lithium output tripled in the December quarter. Good news for Liontown, which last year was absolutely hammered.
Sean, your interview today that comes up after the show, we still have a little bit more to cover, but the interview that we have is with Chris Sheehan, who is Executive Group Investigations at NAB, but importantly, spent 27 years with the AFP.
And he's really enjoying working at NAB. We asked him off air. He said, what's it like? He said, I actually really enjoy working at National Australia Bank because, I'm paraphrasing him totally, but he's not spending weeks and months kind of staking things out.
Yeah. And working his way through the court system as well, which I imagine would be
bureaucratic.
Whereas here, he is talking about scams. He is a scam expert. And so he is providing advice, and he's got the top 5 scams to watch out for this year for Aussie businesses.
Yeah, it's a great interview.
Yeah, it sure is. It is coming up after the show. International news time now. Sean, look, we spent most of the first half of the show talking international news. So just one story to mention today. Weight loss drugs reduce the risk of developing more than 40 different health conditions, but, and it's a big but, somewhat
ironic, given the story we're talking about. Come on.
They also, worsen 19 conditions.
So the big debate over these GLP-1 medications is that we don't have a track record, so we don't know the negative effects of them. We know some of the positive effects. We're talking things like Ozempic and Wegovy. They can certainly help people lose more than a fifth of their body weight. They've been linked to a range of health benefits. A new study from Washington University in St. Louis, Missouri, it looked at the health records of more than 2.4 million people, including 215,000 people taking these drugs to see their effects. So this is a major study. Cardiac arrest, it reduces the risk of cardiac arrest by about 22%. Pneumonia by 16%, Alzheimer's 12%, bacterial infections 12%, alcohol use disorder by 11%. I actually don't know what alcohol use disorder is, but I'm not going to look for that definition. However, there were 42 health outcomes that were shown to have a lower likelihood in a person who was prescribed a GLP-1 drug, according to a report in The Telegraph. However, 19 health outcomes were also shown to be more likely. Nausea, vomiting, headaches, abdominal pain. The study also uncovered the medications are linked to an increased risk of hemorrhoids, low blood pressure, tendinitis, and osteoarthritis. So Whether or not I think the benefits outweigh the negatives, but it depends who you are.
Yeah, depends on if you are predisposed to hemorrhoids, I suppose. But I mean, the 42 conditions that they improve. Those are kind of serious health conditions, whereas the other ones seem like side effects, kind of thing. So it's an interesting kind of almost a definition.
Yeah.
But yes, hemorrhoids is unfortunately where we are ending the show today.
Why do we focus on hemorrhoids in this particular? It could have been anything.
Because we're at the back end of the show, Sean.
Excellent.
There we go.
Done.
Coming up next is the Fear and Greed Daily interview. Chris Sheehan from NAB talking all about the 5 scams for Aussie businesses to watch out for this year. And if you're after some more listening as well, you can check out our sister podcast, How Do They Afford That, which comes out every Wednesday. So there's a new episode out today. It is with my co-host, Canna Campbell, is a financial planner, and she talks through the 6 most common questions that she was asked by clients as a financial planner. So it's actually really interesting, the questions that people just could not wait to get off their chest the moment they walked into their first meeting with her. So it's an interesting conversation. I'll put a link in today's show notes as well. Thank you very much, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It is Wednesday, the 22nd of January, 2025. Make sure you're following the podcast and please join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson and that was Fear and Greed. Have a great day.